Hello, and thank you for joining us in yet another program of Beyond the Surface. It is a pleasure being here with you today. My name is Wendell Badrie, and we will be in today's discussion chatting with two young men representing two different groups in Guyana, and we will be talking about the events surrounding the killings of Isaiah and Joel Henry, as well as Harish Singh and Chatterpal Haripal. Of course, we'll be talking about the unrest which ensued along the west coast of Berbice in Demerara Mahaica, region number 5 of Guyana. Allow me to introduce my guests to you today. They are, and I'll begin with the one to my extreme right, and that is Eden Corbin. Eden Corbin is the communications officer of the Black Lives Matter movement chapter here in Guyana. We'll be asking him a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement here and what is its relativity to that or the chapter in the United States of America. To his right, we have with us today Pandit Deodatt Tillack, and he has been a Pandit for some 20 years, serving most of the time. And please forgive me if I do not get the pronunciation correct, but I will do my utmost to ensure that I do. So I believe it is pronounced the Sri Samaya Puram Miriamam, I do think so, temple at Ogle on the east coast of Demerara. Yes, I know I must have bitten my tongue there. My apologies. But of course, Pandit Tillack will be able to correct us in just a matter of moments. Gentlemen, pleasure having you on the program, and welcome.
Thank you.
We'll begin today by with Eden Corbin, but you know what? Before we begin with Eden, let's ensure that we got that pronunciation correct of the temple. Was it correct, sir?
It's the Sri Samayapuram Mariamman Temple.
Ah, you see there, I would have definitely bitten my tongue had I gotten it correct. With all due respect and without trivializing it, as a matter of fact. Giving it all respect that is due to it, all right? Now, let's begin with Eden Corbin. Eden is, like I said, the communications officer over at the Black Lives Matter movement, the chapter here in Guyana. Eden, tell us what is the relativity of the Black Lives Matter movement chapter here in Guyana to that in the United States of America?
Well, the Black Lives Movement in Guyana is exactly what the name says, the Black Lives Matter. We have decided as a group, a movement, an organization that we will not wait anymore, and our efforts into actually solidifying the movement were, I could say, propelled more so as the entire world was propelled by the incident with George Floyd. I think that is what really pushed us forward into actually, let's say, okay, let's go, let's have this thing, let's do something about it now. And that was the mindset we had at the time. It was a needed organization, I believe, or a needed movement within the context of Guyana, but it was the George Floyd incident specifically that would have encouraged us to expedite and actually move forward in putting together the movement. We have received support, and we have been in communication with the New York chapter and the Canada chapter of Black Lives Matter, and we are continuous in conversations, even with all of the stuff that you would have mentioned earlier. Starting from Sunday to now, we have received statements, we received calls and whatnot from those various those various chapters of Black Lives Matter. And we're relatively young, we're continuing to build, and we're just, looking to keep up the momentum, which is very difficult, as everybody knows, in the midst of a pandemic.
Very well. You mentioned something earlier I'd like to clarify, or for you to clarify for me. That is, the Black Lives Matter movement perhaps stemmed as a result of the killing, I do believe, of George Floyd. And you said that's when you were propelled to take action, so to speak. And if I may quote, you said that's when we decided that we wanted to do something about it.
Correct.
So what do you mean by that? Do something about it. Do what?
Well, it was a case whereby, the concept or the idea behind Black Lives Matter Guyana, it was something that was being discussed. It was something that we did have at the top of our agenda the group of youths, that is, who have decided that, you know, we can actually move forward with this. It was something, and the desire and the need for it did exist within the context of Guyana. But as I said, that at that particular point, when the whole world was able to witness the gruesome murder and killing of George Floyd, and the entire world community was enraged, we realized that this is the best, if not the only chance we would have to go and start and take that first step. Because, you know, when you're dealing with these things, you want it to be perfect. You want to make sure that when you start or when you go on the journey, you want to make sure that everything is set, you know. But I believe at that time it was the rage, it was the raw passion that we felt at that time, and we saw around the entire world. We decided that, you know, this is the time where we're now going to take, and we're going to use this as an opportunity not to just stand in solidarity with the George Floyd incident, but we also wanted to use that as an opportunity to bring to the forum clearly, expressively, without any fear of equivocation, the issues and the matters that have been challenging Guyanese within our own Caribbean regional context. The issues of racism, systematic oppressions, the several killings of young black men, which we have seen, you know, is not just something of the past or something we could place on one particular administration or one particular government, but it is a consistent attempt that is being put forward by persons to ensure that the members of the black community do not receive the justice, that they are not represented adequately, and that is where we wanted to take the stand. Yes, the George Floyd incident, you could have said, is what really pushed us through the door, but it was this anger and rage that was bubbling up for years, and we decided that this was the perfect time to tell the world that, look, we're here, these are our problems, these are the stuff that trouble us, these are the things that are going on in Guyana. And in the midst of all this, we want you to know that Black Lives Matter.
Very well. Thank you very much, Eden. That brings me to what we're here to talk about today. Before I get into any further question with our guests, let me share some facts with you. On Sunday, the 6th of September, 2 teenage cousins were found murdered with slashed necks and various marks about their bodies. And as a result, there was ensuing protest along the west coast of Berbice, as I said, in Demerara, Mahaica, region number 5. The two young men were discovered dead in Cotton Tree, to be exact, the Cotton Tree back dam. And as mentioned before, this happened on Sunday. Their names are Isaiah and Joel Henry. They're 16 and 19 years of age, and they were last seen alive on Saturday. Post-mortem, by the way, the father was the one who, or the community, went in search of the boys after they did not return home, after leaving their home on Saturday to go pick coconuts, as reports have it. Search was carried out, and they were found subsequently with chop wounds. An X was placed on the marks, on the face rather, was carved on the face of one of the victims, and an X was carved behind the head of another victim, the two boys I'm relating to here. Now, as a result, as mentioned before, there was protest action. And then we saw the loss of life of another individual, a 17-year-old, Harish Singh. And subsequently, we saw someone else losing their life, a 34-year-old, Harish. It's not Harish, it is Chatapal Haripal. And since then, there have been numerous calls for peace to prevail and for protesters who are calling for justice to do so in a lawful manner and not in an unlawful manner. So that is what happened from Sunday to today, perhaps. I have the post-mortem information, which I'll share with you in a short while. But before I go any further, I would like to come across to our second guest. Well, maybe not second, but our other guest, Pandit Deodatt Tillack. And sir, I want to find out from you, what are your thoughts on everything that was just mentioned? The killings of Isaiah and Joel to begin with, 16 and 18 years of age in Cotton Tree Village on the west coast of Berbice. And subsequently, Harish Singh, 17, Chatterpal Harry Paul, 34. What are your thoughts on those?
My thoughts are it's rather unfortunate, and first of all, I would like to extend my condolences to the bereaved families of the deceased. Okay? However, what if I am to assume the role of a conspiracy theorist? I would invite myself to speculate that could this be an attempt to ignite conflict between the two major ethnic groups in this country. Although we know historically that Guyana as a nation is a nation of 6 races, unfortunately it seems like the two major ethnic groups in this country, okay, are at loggerhead with each other. What I see basically is that a cycle that keeps perpetuating itself from time to time in different forms. Okay? And it is as though no one, especially our leaders, from political platform, from a religious platform, from a civil society platform, no one wants to really address the issues. Everybody comes out and they give their beautiful, their lofty speeches and whatever, calling for peace. But how do we achieve peace? I am convinced.
Before we go ahead with that, I'm sorry to cut your train of thoughts, but before you go ahead with that, you mentioned that and in your own conspiracy theorism, you mentioned that it would seem as though someone is attempting to ignite racial hate?
That's correct.
You wish to expound on that?
My question is, who stand to benefit from our chaos and confusion? Our internal chaos and confusion.
May I deflect the question to you?
The thing is that we have seen around the world, Guyana at a stage in its history as an oil and gas producing nation, when we ought to be enjoying our wealth as one people, one nation, to achieve that one destiny. Where are we? Where exactly are we? In a state of turmoil. Is that fair for us? Is that fair as in F-A-I-R? Fair for us? Does it make sense? We have seen around the world what happens to countries such as Guyana, and especially with such resources, or a resource such as oil. Okay? I am saying this, and I am appealing, and I am saying this here. Let us try to understand things based on the reality principle, and not to deceive ourselves with wishful thinking. Okay? And not to deceive ourselves with wishful thinking. We need to stand together as one. Okay? We need to stand together as one. We need to live.
I seem as though I'm interrupting you a lot,
Yes,
but
you are.
I need clarity. You're saying in countries around the world,
Yes.
where there is the oil resource, there is confusion, there is chaos.
Yes.
Are you relating that to the events over the past week here in Guyana?
I said if I'm to be a conspiracy theorist, I would invite myself to speculate.
That is what
Okay?
might be happening.
That there might be an attempt to ignite conflict between the two major ethnic groups in this country.
By whom?
Huh?
By whom?
Whenever I find out, I'll let you know.
Very well.
Okay? But the question is, okay? The question is, who stand to benefit from our civil chaos and conflicts, internal
well.
conflicts?
And you were continuing on that point.
Good. So we're calling for peace, and a lot of organizations and leaders in our society are calling for peace and giving lofty speeches. But how can we achieve peace? How can we achieve peace as a nation when we're coming out from our various histories with past hurts, resentments, issues, etc.? We have to resort to the process of healing and reconciliation. And once we can heal as a nation, individually as groups, and collectively as a people, then we can achieve unity. It's a systematic process. Then we achieve unity, then we come together as one. We stand as one. When we stand as one, we achieve the peace that we're seeking. Okay? This attempt must be on the reality principle. And then we achieve the peace. What do? Do we become complacent when we achieve that peace? Or do we work to ensure that we come to the table of diplomacy to iron out our differences so everyone can feel as though they are receiving, that they're benefiting from the system, that they are benefiting from equal opportunities and equitable prosperity? What I've seen from my advent into social life, and especially my political life, I have seen, I have heard people, I've heard their concerns, and I will not discount anyone's concern. I'll not discount anyone's hurt or the issues that they're facing. It is real. Their concerns, their issues, and their feelings and the hurts are real, and we need to be realistic. We need to be pragmatic about this here. Or else, Guyana, we will continue to be in this cycle, and while we may be able to mask and to address the symptoms and mask it for a while, okay, it's just a matter of time before we erupt again. I personally, and this is my mission, okay, in life, okay, in achieving my purpose here in life, is to ensure that I leave this world a better place than how I would have met it, by playing and doing my part. Okay?
Very well. Very well. Eden, what are your thoughts on the events of the past week?
You can see I'm taking time to say what I have to say, because it has really taken a turn for the worst. And I believe that the past week is a rather unfortunate experience. But in that, the main thing that I am happy about in all of this, and that is because I perceive things and I live life in a dualistic theory. That's how I approach a lot of things. I believe that the existence of one thing does not negate the existence of another thing. The existence of one is the indication of something else. It's the same thing where you have light and darkness. The presence of light does not negate the existence of darkness, and vice versa. That means that where we see light, that does not mean that darkness is not there. It just means that for darkness to exist, there must be light. For there to be light, there must be darkness. And while there is, I could say, chaos, terror, whatever people want to classify it or construe it as, the one thing that I can say at least I can be happy about is the fact that everybody is able to see this. It is not because a lot of incidents like this, and in relating to the death of innocent lives, sometimes they're just dealt with in one particular setting, and it is just enraged in one particular setting. To see how the entire country has reacted, for me at least, shows that even though we are moving very slow, we're at least moving. These past few days have been terrible, because the main thing, when I went out there to the march, members of the media and the press persons reached out, and the one consistent question that I've gotten in relation to this is, do I believe it was racially motivated or politically motivated? That is the underline, and I feel that is what's really on everybody's mind. But my thing is, before we even begin to put our political opinions, before we make this a matter of race, what this is about 4 innocent lives that were caught in a crosshair of something. The deaths of Orlando Jonas, Isaiah and Joel Henry, was his
Harris
name,
Singh.
Mr. Harris Singh and
Chatterpal.
Chatterpal. The deaths of these persons did not, for me, how I say it did not start on Sunday. This is something that started before I was even born. Racism is something that is not something that we nurture and cultivate. Racism at this point is inherited. Racism is passed on. To pick up a word from my colleague, Mr. Tillack, it is something that is perpetuated. That means that it has to be coming from somewhere. And for us as a country to reach the point where within less than 48 to 72 hours, we have lost 3 innocent lives, and the only thing that we could think about is whether it is political or racial, whatever, shows us where we stand. The wounds that this country has suffered from since 2018, the division, the divisiveness of racism and political allegiances and whatever that has stemmed from since the no confidence motion. You could even backdate it, has stemmed from 1966 when Guyana gained independence. Or we could even go further back to when we became emancipated, or when the indentured slavers came in, or even when the Europeans would have now come and begun to create civilization in these countries. These things are indicative of the society in which we live in. And to see 4 lives just innocently senseless, that's what it is. It is not a case whereby these young men were in the act of committing some murder. It was not a case where they were fighting over a young lady or fighting over money. It wasn't a case, there was no clear motive up to now. Today is, look how much days since this thing has happened. And up to now, we are unable to say, the police is unable to conclusively state what was the motive. Because in every murder, there must be a motive. For you to kill someone, the elements of the offense of murder, it is twofold. There must be a physical element and there must be a mental element. There must be intention, and that is one of the most important aspects of murder, intent. To me, it does not matter whether the intent was racial or it was political. To me, the fact of the matter is that an intent exists within the minds of our Guyanese to just go out there and set and look at it. The murder weapon speaks to the mind of a killer. You know why thieves carry guns? Because they don't want to spend a lot of time chopping up persons. Because to kill somebody using a sharp tool requires one skill, because you have to know what you're doing. There's parts of the body in which you can attack somebody and they could still remain alive. You understand? So the fact that they were chopped to death speaks to the mental state of that individual or individuals who would have committed these atrocious acts. And that is where we need to start. Before we even begin to bring race into the conversation, before there is somebody who felt comfortable, or some persons who felt comfortable enough to take a sharp object, 16 and 19 years old, chop these 2 young men. The postmortem report says it is 16 inches across, 3 inches wide, and 6 inches deep. And that's just one. That was just the cause of death. They were defensive wounds, which means that at the time when they received these lacerations and cuts, they were fighting for their life. You understand? The other one get chopped from the back and he fall down. Then you proceed to mark an X. That is something that we see in movies. That is what a serial killer does. Somebody who has a mental and that is where we need to start of it. We need to talk about the persons in society who are smiling with us, who are walking amongst us, and they have no regard for human life. For you to just pick up, I don't care whether it was political, I don't care whether it was racial, for the fact that you are comfortable, confident enough to go and commit a murder just like that, speaks to the mindset. speaks to the environment in which we live in. It means it's not an environment safe for anybody, because you could get vexed today and you can go and chop up somebody. Obviously, the stakeholders involved, governmental, opposition, they're going to take their stance, they're going to say things, because as far as they're concerned, this is just a medium through which they're able to now push their own agendas. We cannot let politics and the racism is not a problem in Guyana. And I would reaffirm that. Racism, that's the camera, racism is not a problem in Guyana. Because we would have inherited a system of racism. So for somebody to come and tell me we have a race problem is like, okay, what else? Rain falls from the sky and we get food from the ground. What else? That is a fact. It is something that is already established. We don't need to be talking about race. We need to be talking about the people in society. What is it that's going on in the minds of these people in society? Is this Guyana or is this a war zone? What? And that is what is more concerned. You understand? When you take the perspective from Black Lives Matter again, the fact of it is 2 young black men. Yes, there was the other subsequent killings of Harry Singh and Chatterpal. In the context of the world, they are considered black as well. You understand? Because yes, we are the majority in Guyana. But when we look at the world population, we have to ask ourselves, are we a majority or are we a minority? And that is what we're fighting against. We're fighting against a system in which we live in, an environment in which we live in, which has cultivated these killers. The same system that has made me, has made Tillack, has made yourself, is the same system that has created these other individuals who feel they could go out and commit such atrocious acts. And that is where we need to go back as Guyanese people to our roots. We need to go back at the individual level, and a lot of introspection needs to happen, because the fact that they could just go and murder speaks volumes to the society that we're currently living in. Because
Let me interject here, Eden. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. But on that note, I'd like to read an excerpt from a statement issued by the Guyana Human Rights Association, where it says, in view of the circumstances, the GHRA, which is the Human Rights Association, the Guyana Human Rights Association, is preparing a formal request to the UN Resident Representative for a visit to Guyana of the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions, accompanied by a forensic pathologist. And they went on to say that this is not in any way to discredit the Guyana Police Force, their efforts and their resources and so on, but rather to lend support in terms of resources and otherwise, so that we could get a highly conclusive investigation, all right? Apart from that, they had also alluded to a number of things which you both have alluded to. And something that you both have mentioned is that, so this is where I'd like for us to seek, to test the waters, to see if we're on common grounds indeed. Yes. And you both said that racism is perpetuated, correct?
That's correct.
Where did it come from? Was the question you proceeded to ask. So I'd like to ask both of you, where did it come from? And I know what you said on racism already. Let me hear from Pandit Tillack. Where did racism come from? How do we treat with it?
Well, taking into consideration Guyana's history prior to our independence, you see, Guyana, as when it was a colony, before it got its independence, I taking into consideration the history, what I do know is that when our African ancestors fought for emancipation and got emancipation, I believe it was a slap in their faces when the colonizers decided that they were going to resort to a lesser humane system called indentureship, a more sophisticated form of slavery, where we brought in people, give them some stipend, provided some opportunities for them. Now, what happened there is that it was a slap in the face of our African ancestors, because what it did basically was to cut them off from all the economic opportunities. Now, we were enslaved. We are given freedom, but we do not have an economic base. You did not give us an economic base. After 400 years of slavery. Now, what does it do? What happens here? Of course, if you see now, I come now, you toiling and stuff like that, it might ignite something in some people's heart, in their spirit. And now, these people are giving these indentured laborers opportunities, providing economic opportunities for them, giving them housing, living conditions, providing, and all these things. So now you are at a greater economic disadvantage. And then they go on. So with you building that animosity, not only seeing the advantage that is taking upon you and the disadvantage that you have been placed in, the psychology is now, they decided now, you want your independence, you're never going to be free. Because in order for us to rule you, we must divide you. In order for us to always be above you or to always be deemed superior, to always conquer you mentally, we have to do so through division. And of course, the seeds of discord, war, sown. The truth of the matter is, coming from certain things culturally, we see in certain cultures, when people subscribe to human classification, that also gives rise to racism. In the sense that when you start classifying people based on their skin tone, their ethnicity, their socio-economic status, their religious inclination, or their political affiliation. And all these are contributing factors that come under the umbrella term of racism. Okay? Of racism.
Let me just, Eden, would you agree with what he said there? Very briefly.
Yeah, I mean, he captured the essence of it. I would just lean more to the aspect of that racism. Yes, it was something that they used as a tool. But if you go a little further into history and you just specifically look at the African culture, before the issue of other races were a problem, the main thing that you troubled and haunted the African civilization was tribalism, which was a form, you could say, a less diluted form of racism, where I'm from a particular tribe, these are my people, and we fight because you are not of my tribe, and that's where the wars really started. So it was just a case where, for me, if you could take it upon yourself to look at somebody just because they don't look like you, they have no similarities to you, and think that that person is not deserving of right and respect, something is clearly wrong with you. To me, racism is not a social issue. I believe it is a psychological thing that needs to be treated. Correct. Because it speaks to a deficit in your capacity to just look at somebody and say, okay, this person is of Indian descent, or this person is of indigenous descent, and they cannot be given the same amount of human dignity and rights that I have because I'm a black person. It makes no sense. So the perpetuation of racism in Guyana is only existed because we have provided the environment. And notice I say we, I'm not taking myself out of it, because we all have a part to play. Because at the end of the day, our taxes don't have race on it. The bills that we pay don't have race on it. The money that we spend doesn't have race on it. The only thing that has race is the mind. And it is the fact that a mental disability has been able to creep its way through the entire civilization of our country, of our world, of our society, speaks to a grand eye-opening that needs to happen. We cannot change races. What we can do is ensure that the examples that we are setting for the generation to come, and what we're showing them is not doing anything. Because first, it was 2 young black men killed. Then, it was an Indian man killed. Then, it was an Indian young man killed. You understand? And if I was to do the same as Tillack, to invite myself to be a conspiracy theorist and say how I believe, you could come with a lot of plausible things, and that is what the society needs to understand. Anything can be made to sound plausible. That does not make it factual. That does not make it any more true. Persons can stand up and say anything to justify whatever it is they're doing. But not because it sounds sensible, not because it sounds plausible, means that it must be factual and it must be given the same respect that something that is actually factual and actually plausible. So that is where I would lean a little differently from where he said in racism. I feel it's more something that has to do with the mind than has to do with the society in itself. Because we're man before we interact with society. You are man, you have your mind, you have your ability to think, and yes, we think differently. We have different opinions, but why should that be something that you should perpetuate?
Very well.
And why I wish to agree with him, even in the field of psychology, the thing is we're all social beings. And what I find to be rather a mockery of human wisdom is that as social beings, how can we live life knowing that we need each other, and yet we're excluding people based on their skin tone, based on their socioeconomic status, based on certain factors? Okay? How can we live life knowing fully well that we need each other? You understand me? We are social beings. We need each other. We need each other to survive. We need each other to enable us to weather the storm of depression, anxiety, and so forth. We need each other. It's our genuine and logical connections with each other that enables us. So that is why you see what we're doing, and I would wish to build on what he would have said also, what Corbin would have said, is that Guyana, I've always described Guyana, I will continue to describe Guyana until I see that paradigm shift in the consciousness of people. Okay? Always describe Guyana as a neurotic society, an emotionally unstable society. And the question is, again, who benefits from that emotional instability?
Very well. So we're both saying that it has to do with the psychological state, the mental state of a being. Summarize how we can bring healing to our nation, especially given the incidences or occurrences over the past week. How do we find conciliation? How do we find common ground? How do we heal as a people? Let's start with Eden, and then we'll...
We need to heal the same way in which racism is perpetuated by the individual. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that healing and getting over and moving forward from these type of instances reoccurring is not something that we can expect overnight. It needs to be a deliberate, and I put emphasis on the word deliberate. It must not be something that looks good on TV or sounds good, to the population. But we really need, as citizens of Guyana, to sit down. We need bodies like the ERC to get a little more bite. They need to have a bit more bite, because whatever it is that they're doing right now is really showing that much is desired. I understand that it is a newly formed commission, but that does not excuse them or take away the responsibility that they have. Is to ensure that in a multiracial, multi-ethnic society like this, you cannot afford to be racial, because we lose more than we are to gain. And we need to not focus on our own experiences, because I see that is always a trend that comes up when these conversations happen. Black people are going to stand up and say, oh, we get the depression thing, and then the Indian folks are going to stand up and say, oh, well, what about us? And then the Amerindian folks are going to stand up and say, oh, but y'all ain't taking us. And then the Chinese. And the thing is, as I said, everybody can stand up and say, but the thing is, we're not looking to point fingers. Yes, things have happened to the Indian community. They have been met with equal amount of racism that the black community has been meted out to. But it is not for us to know, when we are in the midst of a era of senseless killing, where the majority of these persons that are losing their lives are black persons. The Indian community needs to be more sensitized. They need to be more cognizant of the situation. And this is for all the other various ethnic groups. They need to be a more understanding. Because we cannot just say, okay, well, yes, Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter. We need to be cognizant. In the right context, all lives can matter and all lives do matter. All lives should matter. I use can, do, and should to show in all of these contexts, this is what should happen. They will matter. But in this context right now, Black Lives Matter, because it is the black community that is taking the brunt of these things. Because when the protest begins and when the shooting of the rubber pellets and when the tear gas and all of these things and whatever adequate response the police force or the government deems necessary, it is the people on the ground that are losing. You consistently ask who stands to gain. The only people who stand to gain are the persons who are not caught up in between that. It is the normal persons like me and you who lose the most. The people at the top, not so much, because they are insulated from this. I'm asking and I'm appealing to every single citizen. Start with yourself. Yes, you might feel a particular way, but ask yourself. In the thing I appreciate the fact that the Ali administration will invite the UN, but if you do your research and check in human rights and international law, you would know that most of these special commissions and things, they're more or less futile because they only work as much as the individual state can empower them to do such. At this point in time, the Guyanese society will not be that welcoming to outsiders coming to assist us in this problem. We've seen this happen. It probably wasn't racism, but when you look at the war in Syria, in Iraq, in the Middle East, when you go to all other places, there is civil unrest. But we have to deal with it on the ground as people. We can't come to the table as black people, as Indian people, as Amerindian people. We have to come to it as people, as citizens of Guyana. And once we all have the same goal in mind, which is to provide healing and conciliation, that means when we're doing these things, we have to come to the table with everything. Everything is born. We can't come holding out or just, saying things to appease. It has to be a sincere attempt by every single aspect and part of society that we are not going to allow ourselves to go down. These deaths and these killings should be enough alarm for each of us to say that, you know what? Enough is enough. Another Harish does not need to die for us to get the point. Another Isaiah does not need to die. We have to come to the table with open hearts, open minds, and an open ear to listen to what the other side, because I feel that is another problem that we suffer. When we have these issues, persons come and they're saying a lot.
Let me interject here, Eden. I'm sorry, but we're really out of time, all right? So I really need to stop you there. But thank you so much for that. I hear you. Pandit Tillack.
Great. So to build on what my colleague would have said, and of course, he's quite passionate with his positions, as a conscientious patriotic Guyanese, it hurts me to see what our nation is going through at the moment. When we, in the third decade of the 21st century, in the age of enlightenment, the age of information and technology, that we continue to allow ourselves to be programmed and to be controlled by a system. Until we emancipate ourselves from this mental slavery that we have allowed, willingly give up our ability to think for ourselves, we will always be enslaved by the system. I'm appealing to my fellow Guyanese. Now we must understand that interlinking thread that binds us together is our nationality, irregardless of our ethnicity, religious background, political affiliation, socioeconomic status, gender identity, etc. And we need to stand together as one. We are one people. We need to empower and understand the philosophy behind our motto. One people, one nation, one destiny. And we must hold our elected officials responsible. I do welcome the initiative, especially the initiative from the Guyana Human Rights Association, because, hearing a statement coming out from the Guyana police force, from the crime chief himself, which is rather unfortunate, for him to invite himself to discount and to make a pronouncement on the case as to that it is not motivated in this respect, creates suspicion in the minds of people. And therefore, once people harbor suspicion in their minds, they will not trust you. And once they don't see you to be impartial, they will always hold you with that degree of suspicion. And that is what is really preventing us as a people to move forward. Because why? We are not only holding each other for ransom with suspicion, we're also, we have those animosities that are being nurtured and being fueled, etc. Healing is very important, my friends. There's no one size fit all when it comes to healing, but I do encourage you to please let good sense prevail. We're one human family under God, and therefore we need to respect each other and be our brother's keeper for the benefit of Guyana. I thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I thank you as well for joining us today on this program, Beyond the Surface. My name is Wendell Badrie. I stand for justice for Isaiah Henry. I stand for justice for Joel Henry. I stand for justice for Harish Singh. I stand for justice for Harry Paul Chatterpal. I do not stand for lawlessness. I do not stand for any act that will be perpetuated in such a way that it infringes the right of another individual. I do not support that. Once again, thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure. Join us next week for another edition of Beyond the Surface. So long.